Now playing Producer Mixtapes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, our guest artist, Jonathan Byrd. Hello, Jonathan.
Howdy.
We are finding you at your home. Is that right?
I'm in my home, which I have converted this little corner of my home into my own little television studio, which is how I have made almost all of my living for the past 13 months.
And you're broadcasting every Wednesday night, as I understand it.
Yeah, every Wednesday night. And now, since we have affiliated with Twitch, which is this really great community-driven platform that I wish we had started paying attention to 2 years ago, it's very casual. It's not really a show. It's more like I invite you into my space, which is what I've been doing all along anyway.
Right, but literally now we're coming in all the way to you, and there's something that the pandemic has brought that you would have never asked for, but it's cool in its own way.
Absolutely. In fact, the pandemic has created this entire amazing music scene on Twitch.
So all of our Blue Rockers know how to find you now, and of course we have history with you. We've got some really great history with you, Mr. Byrd.
Absolutely.
And it's nice to talk to you. I think you're at home working on songs today, so we really appreciate the chance to interrupt for just a moment. And I also know that you're meeting our engineer, Nathan Walters, too. So say hi to Nathan.
Hey, Nathan.
It's nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Listening to your records and hearing a whole lot about you from Billy, and I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks. Well, I know they don't do any amateurs at Blue Rock. I know you absolutely know what you're doing. Much respect.
So Jonathan, we're all about music discovery here on Flipside, and one of the things that I discovered when you landed on the scene. In fact, let me just say for our viewers, Jonathan just burst onto the folk music scene. I think it was in about '08 with his record, "The Law and the Lonesome." And you probably did lots of great stuff before that, but that's how it happened to me. That's how you happened to me. And that's kind of what we love to touch here on this show. And why we're doing it is to remember some of the good stuff, and the reason that we all got into this in the first place. Your song "Coyote" is one of those treasures that maybe for many it's an undiscovered treasure, but not after this. It's trance-like, it's hypnotic in a way, but it really does sound like it was always there, Jonathan, that song was not written by anybody. It doesn't sound like it was played by anybody. It just sounds like something you, like a little pocket of gold in the hills. It just was always there.
Thank you.
So I want to take a minute. We'll just listen to it.
He hugged the brush and ran the ridge. He dropped down and headed for the bridge. He dropped down and headed for the bridge, quiet as the rising moon. Quiet as the rising moon, I saw Coyote.
So Jonathan, what was it like in the studio that day?
I was in the basement in Toronto. And I mean, like in a basement with the washing machine and a bicycle, like a real northern basement. And in this basement that Chris Bartosh lived in, who basically produced the record, I went to his house because I met him. Where do I start with this guy? Okay, so we were sitting around having dinner with friends, and they were talking about this guy who had been wearing a fake mustache and a bowler hat at every gig for like weeks. And then we went out later to this place called the Transac. I think it's called the Transnational or the Trans something New Zealand and Australian club. So it was a club that was started by expatriates of down under who had moved to Toronto. And at this point, it was more like a bar with a nice room. It was a bar up front, and there was a big room in the back for concerts. And in the front, there was a couple of guys playing, and there was this amazing fiddle player who was wearing a fake mustache and a bowler hat. And I said, there cannot be two of these guys. Toronto is a big city, but there cannot be two of these guys. This has to be Bartosz. So I introduced myself, and he invited me up to play a song, and I played a song, and he said, I'm having a party. Come to my party later. And so then maybe a couple days later, I went to a party at his house. It was great. It was a who's who of acoustic musicians in Toronto, which is an incredible music scene. It's got a very strong bluegrass scene. And by the end of the night, he had traded out his bowler and the fake mustache for a tractor hat. And by the end of the night, I thought, I want to play some more music with this guy. What is he all about? So he invited me. He said, I got some recording gear in the basement. Come record a couple songs. And I had kind of the beginnings of a record called The Law and the Lonesome. I had that song, The Law and the Lonesome. I had Clean. I had Coyote. I had Diana Jones. And so I went over to his house one day, and we had to get the roommates out of the house because they were walking on the wooden floors above, and it was all creaking. And, we had to get the roommates out of the house. And he had a Neve, he had an original Neve 1073, and he had an original Universal Audio 1176. And that was my vocal chain. And again, we're in the basement with like rusty things. And then he had another audio chain that was a great modern audio chain, whatever it was, so that he could also record my guitar. So I sang and played everything, and I did, 5 songs. But I remember specifically Prairie Girl and The Law and the Lonesome I did that day. Mm. And so when I was done recording a few songs, he took the mic and moved it from this single chain, the Neve and the Universal Audio, and he put on some headphones and he played some bass. And then he moved the mic around again, and then he played some fiddle. And you've heard the song, so he goes, he's just making, I don't know what he's doing. And I can't, he's only got one set of headphones. And then, he got his electric, he had a Les Paul with a Fender Twin, an original Les Paul. I mean, just incredible stuff. Just a few of the most incredible things. And then again, he's going, bing, bing. And, he'll sit there for 20 seconds, blah, and then he'll sit there for 20 seconds. I have no idea what he's doing. And then when he's done doing this 5 or 6 times with 5 or 6 different instruments, he turns up the faders. He goes, what do you think about this? And I just went to another dimension. It was like, I don't know. I could have been in the studio with Daniel Lanois and have sounds like that happening. I couldn't believe what just happens. It's like, okay, I'm making a record here. I'm coming back to town in about 4 days, and I'm going to come back with several more songs, and then I've got to leave, and you're just going to stay here and move the mic around and make sounds and send them to me. And that was the process of that entire record. And about a month later, I had all the tracks I wanted, and I mixed it myself in my garage, which is fitting. It was recorded in the basement, mixed in the garage. And that's the record.
So great. Well, the record is it's formed and marked by understatement. There's just so few notes on that record. Mm. And I mean, that's as mysterious a process as is befitting to the song.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm really glad for that. Okay, and then the other thing, since we're deep in, Quiet as the Rising Moon. Fading like a midnight mile. What state of mind are you in now? Where do you remember where you were then?
So as far as the writing of it, I actually began with a song by Gillian Welch and David Rawlings called Elvis Presley Blues. And I do this sometimes to light the fire under myself because I got to write songs. I'm a songwriter. I got to put out records. I got to make stuff. That's my job. And I think people who aren't artists, they think about inspiration as this magical thing that artists somehow possess or that we tap into. And like writer's block is this thing when suddenly that magical connection is lost. And that's not my experience at all with inspiration. My experience with inspiration is that you roll up your sleeves and you get a shovel and you start digging and until something shiny comes up. So what I did was I took this song. It goes, I was thinking that night about Elvis, the day that he died, the day that he died. And it's a great song. It's a story of Elvis Presley told through whatever their inspiration was for that moment. And I wrote each line on a piece of paper with a line between so I could write new words with the same scansion. So I'm adopting a form. I'm like, if they had written a sonnet, I'm writing a sonnet. If they'd written a haiku, I'm writing a haiku. I'm adopting the form of their song. So I remember the first words were, I saw Coyote on the mesa. I'm just writing. I don't know why I thought about that. Maybe I was reading a story. Maybe I had heard coyotes the night before. We have coyotes here too. But that's where I started. And I wrote tons of words because that song has tons of words. And then I changed the music around and worked with the melody and did different things. And I still just had tons and tons of words. And I even had something that I could play at some point. I played it for a couple of people, but I was never satisfied with it. At least a year, maybe 2 years went by without me really being satisfied with this work. And I was walking around at the Kerrville Folk Festival at night with a guitar on and just sort of hearing strains of music and looking for something magical that was happening. And I began playing this little riff. Which is Lydian. And I didn't know where to go from there, but I did this thing that I do a lot where I stopped playing the guitar and just started singing a melody. And somewhere in my brain, some little guy ran down the hall and said, these are the lyrics. These right here. Hand these to the boss.
Wow.
And I had to erase a lot of the lyrics. I had way too many lyrics. And I maybe used a third or even less of what I had written. Once I sang that melody, then I found the chords that suited the melody. Then I realized I was actually in a different key than that main riff was in, which was also satisfying because that main riff keeps taking you away from home, which really suits the imagery of the song. So it's unusual for me to write anything at that festival, but I found kind of a dark corner between two RVs and worked out that melody and played and figured out how to do the chords. And a couple of people came up they saw me, hey Byrd, how you doing? I'd be like, nah. Like I couldn't verbalize anything, but I could make it clear that something's happening right now.
Well, man, I feel like we've just gone to a master class. Thank you for that. Reminds me of
you're welcome.
Of when you and I got to teach together here at Blue Rock. What a weekend that was.
Such a great weekend, and I learned so much as a teacher that weekend that I have carried forward with me ever since.
Man, well, likewise. So, Nathan, I know you want to talk to Jonathan too about his recent record.
Yeah. Well, question I had planned, we kind of just hit on, but I'm gonna elaborate on it a little bit more. So I wanted to talk to you about how your music discovery kind of either informs or influences your writing and your sound, and in particular, I guess, like the development from The Law and the Lonesome all the way to Pick Up Cowboy. There's definitely like a development there, and I guess I want to ask you now, hearing kind of how you started Coyote, do you just mine songs that you know, or do you go out and hunt and look for these new things, and then that might light a spark that then you go take that inspiration with you to start on a new song, or just
yes.
Okay, yeah.
All of the above and whatever works.
Okay.
Absolutely. Sometimes I start with a piece of music. Often if I make time to practice the guitar, I will write songs, because I just find something that sounds interesting to me on the guitar. I'm working through a new chord change, or I'm playing a scale a different way, or I'm learning a different melody, and then I realize, I can reharmonize this in the minor, or I can reharmonize this as a Dorian mode, and then I'm off into something very new. And it's almost like I'm creating new things for myself to discover in my own practice. I hear something that I play that's new to me, and that bends my ear. So often I'll begin, and really that's kind of my natural inclination, is to begin with music. I'm really a musician first. I've been playing music since long before I was writing.
Okay.
But I have learned how to go the other way, and really my process is trying new processes all the time.
I'm with you.
That's what gets me writing. So when I discovered that people started with words, or say I went to Nashville for the first time and I heard this phrase about 3 or 4 times before, I was like, what is going on? People would say, hey man, I got a great title for a song. I'm like, what? How do you do that? My uncle used to love me, but she died. Well, whatever. You just, you have a hook in the title that gets people into it. And that's a very country music. It's a very Nashville style of writing. So I also said, well, I got to figure out how to do that. What's an interesting title? I come up with a title and try to write to that. And it's a much longer process for me. It's harder to do, but I've learned how to do it. I learned how to co-write, same thing. I need to throw myself in a room with another writer that I respect and come out with something.
So what does that look like? Is it like, do you guys come together, and it might be different every time, but do you guys come into the room with different ideas already going, or is it more like a snowball fight where y'all just go a line and then the other guy will do another line and kind of pass it back and forth?
Yeah, in Nashville, they can be very intentional. You have a meeting at 11 o'clock in the morning, and you get together and you open up your notebooks or your laptops or whatever, and you look around for things that you've been working on. Hey, what about this? I got this idea. Hey, what about this? I wrote a song called Chicken Wire because I opened my notebook and I had written Chicken Wire at the top of the page as if I had intended to write something called Chicken Wire, but there was nothing else on the page. I was like, that's funny, that's Chicken Wire. And I turned the page, the guy's like, no, what's that? I said, it's just Chicken Wire, that's all it says. Like, that'd be a song. Let's write that. So that's how it works. I mean, it's kind of the same. It's that we're just, as me writing by myself and kind of throwing new things at myself, we're just throwing new things at each other until somebody says, hey, that sounds great. And much like improv or acting, the trick is just to keep saying yes.
Yes.
Even if you don't like the idea, if it hits you funny or whatever, just try to find a way to say yes. And you're moving that dirt. You're getting down to the shiny stuff that way.
Well, man, thank you for your playlist. That's one thing that fascinates us is when you pick songs, what are those songs doing to you? Where's that taking you? That Daka Braka. Oh, my God.
Isn't that something? Isn't that something?
Yep.
The Ukrainian, but it's like they're pulling from the blues. They're pulling from like heavy metal. They're pulling from their own traditions. They're pulling from like Greek style theater. That's just fascinating. I still can't get enough of them.
Well, you have your fingers and toes out there in the big world. You spend a lot of time in Denmark, and wrote a bunch of songs that were inspired by Kierkegaard, and I mean, it's. I think you're our poster child today of this process of listening and finding and discovery and absorbing, and then responding. So, hey, thank you for that.
Thank you, Billy. It's great to meet you, Nathan.
It's good to meet you. Yeah.
And I will say to everybody, don't miss Jonathan Byrd. Any way you can find him. We want you back. We're going to work on getting you back here sooner than later if the pandemic allows.
I appreciate it. I love coming down there. We'll do it anytime I can. Just want to say you're gonna hear whatever you hear off of Pickup Cowboy. You're gonna hear Mr. Paul Ford on the cello, and what you think is a bass is probably a cello. And he passed away a few years ago, and we just miss him every day. Great musician.
Everybody, let's go out on a song that Jonathan's going to pick right now from the recent record, Pickup Cowboys. Which one?
We Used to Be Birds.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You say my name, I say your name. We used to be